Welcome to Mindful with Minaa, where we explore how mindfulness can enhance your relationships and well-being. I'm your host, Minaa B, a licensed social worker, mental health educator, and author. Through insightful discussions, I will guide you towards self-awareness and self-efficacy, empowering you to effectively manage your relationships, reduce burnout, and be more present with yourself. So let's jump into today's episode. What's up, Mindful community? Welcome back to another episode. And today I want to talk about aging. I want to talk about aging with wisdom and understanding that age does not equal maturity. I'm always seeing these posts online about like women in their 30s and so many people being afraid to turn 30, afraid to turn 35, and just this natural fear of getting older. And I have to admit, I never really had an issue with aging, and I think it's because I was always friends with people who were significantly older than me that I always felt like, oh my gosh, like when am I going to catch up to y'all? And clearly I'm never going to because age gaps don't shrink as you get older. But there definitely is a difference in maturity when you are like 19 hanging out with a 27-year-old and being 30 hanging out with a 38-year-old, right? And when I was around that age, a lot of my friends were significantly older than me because they were colleagues that turned into friends. And so now at the age of 34, I sit back often and I reflect on who I am as a person. And people are always telling me that I'm mature for my age. And it's something that they always told me from the time I was young. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why that was, because I always felt like an only child growing up, even though I am not. And it is possible because most of my siblings are significantly older than me that I matured kind of faster. And I also had to do a lot of caretaking as a child. And I'm going to do a completely separate episode on caretaking because that requires a lot of detail and just stuff to unpack and process. So I do know those things, however, aged me up a bit. But I also feel like my maturity comes from a lot of the work that I've done on myself. And so I want to talk about this concept of aging, but also aging with grace and aging with wisdom. Because there are a lot of people who are aging, but they are still very childlike. And they are still operating as their childlike self. And there are a variety of reasons behind why that happens, but emotionally immature people tend to be the type of people who will age backwards. So they're getting older, but they're acting younger and younger as they get older. And a lot of the time is because they have not done a lot of work on themselves to mature internally. And it can be because they were robbed of so many things during their own childhood that they don't know how to do the work of sitting with their feelings. They don't know how to do the work of managing their emotions in a healthy way. They don't know how to do the work of being mindful of the needs of others. They tend to have very poor relational skills. And can you overcome emotional immaturity? Yes, but it takes a lot of work. It takes doing the work of going to therapy, being self-aware, being self-reflective, learning how to take feedback from people without being argumentative or deflecting. It's learning how to recognize sometimes you are going to have an impact on people, and it can be very helpful to listen to the things people have to say about you and to listen to the ways people think about you. Because if everywhere you go in life, you tell me a story about how either in this relationship or in this friendship, this same type of fallout keeps happening, I'm going to say, well, it sounds like there's a common denominator here, and it's you. You might be the problem. And it takes a lot of maturity to be able to own that as the truth. And so I think it's really important for us to remember that as we age and get older, aging with grace and wisdom requires a lot of thoughtfulness. It requires you to be somebody who is willing to do the work of recognizing how you impact other people. But you also have to be willing to do the work of recognizing how you get in your own way, how you self sabotage, how you engage in denial. None of us are perfect. And so to grow older and believe that you have no flaws, you have nothing to work on, you are the best thing out there, and everybody is missing out from being in a relationship with you, sometimes that's not the truth. Some people are actually gaining by not being in a relationship with you because there's a lot of things you're not working on that impacts your relationships. And so the first way I've learned to age with grace and wisdom is by spending years in therapy. Yes, I am a therapist who sees a therapist. That is common within the mental health field amongst professionals. We're not perfect people just because we have degrees and hours of training under our belt, okay? We go through stuff. And I think a really good therapist is somebody who is actually taking the time to work with another therapist so that they can work on their own stuff to ensure they're not bringing it into their sessions. And so right now, for me, I've spent years in therapy. I've spent years being in a safe space with somebody who sees the world the way that I see the world and understands certain concepts because I'm also a therapist. And so it's really great to work with someone who kind of is clinically trained the way I am trained. And it creates a safer environment for me to be able to talk about the issues that bother me. And I truly believe that if we spend years dragging a suitcase of emotional baggage with us as we age, that is going to weigh us down. That luggage is going to become heavier and heavier and more difficult to pull over time. And through therapy, I let that luggage go a long time ago. I opened up the suitcase, sorted out all of the mess, and I left it where it needed to be left. And I took out the elements I needed to take, and I learned whatever lessons I needed to learn from it. And so at 34 years old, I don't have the baggage that I had at 27 because I worked through that baggage when it was in front of me. And I worked through it by finding a healthy support system, like having a therapist who had the skill set to sit with me in certain things that I didn't want to weigh my friends down with, but also my friends didn't have the expertise to help me with the things that was in my emotional suitcase. And so my question for you is, are you still holding on to things from the past? Because that is going to impact your ability to age gracefully and to age with wisdom. You have to ask yourself, what are some things that you need to let go of? What are some ways that you need to surrender? In what ways do you need to forgive yourself? And maybe there are people in your life that you need to forgive. And if you go back to episode 17, I did a segment on forgiveness where I talk about forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. Forgiveness is literally learning how to let that suitcase go. Because why are you still dragging it? If the contents inside of that suitcase do not serve you, why are you still dragging it along in your life? And so that is a big thing when it comes to aging. There are going to be times where you have to say, I have to let go of this. This is no longer serving me. I'm moving on to the next chapter of my life. I don't need this thing anymore. Another way that I believe we can age gracefully and with wisdom is by having a willingness to be curious about life. There are things that I want at 34 that I actually did not want when I was 24. And so I've been opening myself up to new concepts, new ideas, and I've been giving myself permission to have new desires. Aging with wisdom basically means using enough discernment to say, I am rooted in who I am. I am choosing to be my most authentic self, and I am willing to explore every intricate detail of who I am. Just because I didn't want it 5 years ago doesn't mean I can't want it now. And when we have wisdom, what we're doing is we're asking ourselves, what is right for us and what's not right for us? Where are we trying to go, and what are the actionable steps that we need to take so that we can get the things that we want out of life? And when you have wisdom, you also are able to take a moment to pause and reflect and say, well, there are certain things that I need to let go of. And there are certain things that I actually don't need to make room for because it's just going to take up space in my head and in my heart. And so aging with wisdom also requires curiosity. It's okay to grow more into who you are and recognize that people change. You have permission to change. And when you have wisdom, you recognize when you're changing. And when you recognize when you're changing, you start to take the steps and you start to take action so that you can continue to live the life that you're desiring to live. And so I truly believe that we are all called to be curious at all times. And so how can you continue to be curious even as you get older? Because there is so much life to be explored. And when you give yourself permission to take new things in, you also learn so much more about yourself. The last thing I want to share about aging gracefully and with wisdom is that when you grow older, one of the things that's really important is learning to grow more into yourself and learning to grow more into being authentic and genuine. It's saying, I don't have to conform and I don't have to be like everybody else. It's also saying that I don't have to be the way that I was when I was 25. Learning to be authentic and staying true to who you are means being rooted in your values and in your beliefs. And recognizing that as you get older, hardship still is going to exist. We're not going to outgrow hardship. We're never going to outage hardship. There's always going to be some form of adversity. And I think sometimes when we get older and we face adversity, we start to allow our values and our beliefs to waver because we've put a time constraint on our lives. And maybe we have said by 30 or by 35 or even by 40, I was supposed to accomplish this thing. And so now I'm kind of making decisions that I know I don't want to make, or I'm making decisions that I know don't align with my values, but I'm stuck on time. And I want you to ask yourself, as you get older, how can you lean more into just being genuinely who you are? And there are going to be times where that looks like recognizing you're not getting the things that you want as a result of staying true to who you are. And that is where the grief comes in. And grief is always going to be a natural part of aging and life. So as you think about aging with grace and wisdom, I want you to leave a comment. If you're listening on Spotify, what does aging with grace and wisdom look like to you? And if you're listening on any other podcast platform, please rate this podcast and leave a review. And in the comments, let me know what are the things that you're thinking about when it comes to your own aging, grace, and wisdom. That's all for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you just listened to, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast on your preferred platform. Also, don't forget to share it with a friend and on social media. To stay connected with me and my work, follow me on social media and subscribe to the Mindful with Mina newsletter, which can be found on my website, www.minab.com. You can also continue learning from me by ordering my book, Owning Our Struggles, which is available at all major book retailers. Stay tuned for a new episode next week, and most importantly, remember to be present and stay mindful. Take care and goodbye for now.